Hello, and welcome to another session of Maya Basics with me, RBB. Hello, everybody. We are going to today in Maya Basics number 7. We're going to talk a little bit about refining our models. I was hoping we are going to move on to like modeling something together, but I think I'm going to do a couple more of these sort of basic modeling and maybe basic point 5 things to make our hard surface modeling look a little bit better. And today what we're going to look at is smoothing, refining the edges of our stuff, and maybe we'll get to soft select. So, all right, let's look at, of course, we want to set our project. Boop. Okay. And we'll start with our good old friend, the cube here. And if we look at this cube and we were to render it and look at it, what it looks like, IRL once it's rendered, it looks pretty cheesy because it's got that perfect edge. And we talked about this a couple days ago when we looked at beveling. And what we talked about was if you grab an edge and in your modeling toolkit and other ways, if you choose bevel, it'll smooth out that edge, right? We looked at how to bevel things. And remember that bevel is going to split the difference between the edge you've chosen to bevel and the next closest edge. Now, where that is a little bit different, if you recall, is if I have this whole edge loop and say this whole edge loop and we bevel it, it's going to split the difference. Okay. And of course we can adjust the fraction of the bevel. We can round the segments, but you may not want it like rounded. Okay. But regardless, with a little bit of beveling, this looks better. And we really only care what the camera can see, right? So if we don't necessarily care about, these back corners back here because, the camera can't see it. If the camera can't see it, we don't care. All right. I'm going to delete this guy and make another one. Boop. Okay. Sorry. You don't like the boops? Just move on. Okay. So beveling is one of our options once we have finished modeling. Once we have finished whatever we're doing. Like, let's make some little strange shape here. I'm going to grab the face and I'll extrude. And we talked about extruding the other day. Remember, you have to do something with it as soon as you extrude, right? Don't get caught up in something else. Extrude again. I don't know. I'm going to make this sort of gourd bottle looking thing. All right, I'm going to extrude again. And every time I extrude, I do something to that face. There we go. So I don't know. This is my thing. I don't know what this is, but there you go. I made it. All right. So let's say that this is our basic shape that we're modeling. All right. And it's just that. It's quite basic. We haven't added any divisions or anything. And there we go. If we are thinking ahead to what it is that we are trying to make, and let's name this just to be, I'm going to call it smoothing, because I'm not exactly sure what this thing is. We could grab all the edges and bevel them. Okay. If we do, it's going to look a little funny. I'll show you. Okay. Whoop, if I grab all of the edges and bevel, it's not too bad because what it did was it took into account that everybody else was beveling also, and it beveled even inside edges and stuff we didn't necessarily need to do, but it's not the worst thing ever, right? Oh, yes, it is. That's some terrible modeling right there. Okay, so beveling is not the way that we would want to refine that, or at least not a one and done big old hammer squeaky hammer of beveling. We would want to refine this. So maybe we want to grab this edge loop around the top. Okay, and maybe this edge needs to be beveled, and this edge. We could choose the ones we want to bevel and then choose bevel. Another option, if our model has become more complex and we want to, in general, just smooth down all the edges. We saw that bevel didn't work very well. So what we can actually do, and if we just added divisions, the geometry wouldn't change. The faces would just be each divided more into 4 or 16 or whatever. Okay, we don't want to do that. So we have a tool called Smooth. And what Smooth does is over here in the modeling toolkit, it's a bunch of places, okay? But it's here in the modeling toolkit. And if we have an object and we choose to smooth this, so I'm going to grab all the edges, all the faces, it doesn't really matter. And I say smooth. Okay, what smooth does is it takes every single face and subdivides it. okay, in width and height. So basically one face becomes four. Okay, that one little bevel became four. This was that face became four. This face became four. Okay, so it looks like this weird little like gourd looking thing because it took all of the faces and sort of divided them and split the difference and kind of smoothed it out the best it could. Now I could up the divisions. I could say do it again. And each of those sets of four will divide into four, right? So we're exponentially getting more and more faces. And after a while, we're not actually smoothing anymore. We're just adding faces. Okay. So that's not really what I wanted either. I wanted this to just sort of soften and not be quite so CG cuckoo looking. So we're going to use smooth, but we're going to like rein it in a little bit and not let it just try to do its thing with one big old hammer of smoothness. So the way we can do this is I'm going to move this guy over for a second. We'll start with just a cube. If I want this cube to soften its edges, now that's not too many, and we could probably do bevel, but let's say we want to smooth it. If I smooth just the cube, remember that every one of these faces is going to split into four, and then it's going to try to average them, and it winds up being like almost like a rough ball, okay? Because every face got divided into four, that one got divided into four, this one got divided into four. All right. Now, in this case, if we up the divisions, it's going to get a little smoother, right? Until it stops. Like that's about as many divisions as we can do before it doesn't change the geometry anymore. So this is a smoothed cube. Okay, it kept dividing the faces. We divided each face 3 times. So like exponentially split the faces into four and every face into four and every face into four 3 times. So we have a lot of faces, but we've actually essentially made a sphere, right? Now it's a little boxy, right? It's not perfect, okay, but it's probably good enough for whatever we're doing. All right, if we made an actual sphere here, if we made a sphere, they're not going to look all that different. Okay. And in fact, you may say, well, this one actually looks better because you can see sort of the facets around this one. The other thing that's wrong with the sphere from the get-go when it's born is that the sphere has these poles, right? A vertice with all the divisions coming out of it. And if we're just making a model like for an image or for, a set or something, that might be okay. But if we're using like a game engine or we're sending our models somewhere else and sometimes into other like painting software and stuff, that's bad topology. And it's a little advanced for what we're learning right now. So for right now, and if you watch some other beginning tutorials, there's lots of good ones out there. They don't even mention fixing the poles. But it is something that later on you're like, dang, I wish I had known this from the beginning. Notice that this smoothed cube has no poles, right? It still technically has the faces. So you can see where there's a face there and there's a face there. Okay, but it has no poles. So this is actually way better modeling because it's all polygons. It's all cubes. No, that's not right. It's all quads, right? It's all four-sided faces. Here, it's not four-sided faces, okay? So I'm going to delete this guy. Bye-bye. So that's kind of cool. So you're saying I could take a cube and by dividing it enough times, I basically make it a sphere. Yes, because this is sort of like our disco ball, right? The disco ball doesn't ever like get into little triangles. It has all squares. So that's kind of cool. So I can take a cube and I could turn it into a well-modeled sphere. All right, so that's kind of groovy. All right, let's look at what else we can do. If we took this cube, all right, what if we stretched it out and then did the same thing and smoothed it? Would that make any difference? Let's see, we're gonna grab all of the edges, whoop, or the faces, whatever, smooth it. Okay, well, you can see that it's exactly the same thing, right? But it's stretched out. So maybe that's a little closer to the shape you want. So while I told you guys early on, start with the primitive that is closest to the shape you want. Like if I was trying to make a spaceship or something, is it closer to a cylinder or a sphere or a cone? But there comes a point when you're like, you know what? I could make my round object out of a cube and not have to fix geometry later. So there is that. So it's not that it was wrong to say go by what's closest to what you're trying to make, but realize that you can use these primitives in a different way. Let's look at the torus, okay, the bagel looking thing here, okay? Now we know that that's this bagel, and you're like, Ria, I don't know how many times in my life I'm going to need to model a bagel. Okay, but that's not all it does. Okay, because if you recall back in our attribute editor, when it's born, we can go over here to that third tab and we can change the number of divisions. So maybe what the shape we really want is this is a hexagon or a pentagon or whatever, one of those octagons. Okay, or something like this. So I can also lower the number of faces or divisions, okay, to create something closer to what I want. So if I wanted a bolt or a gear or, something like that, maybe I start with something that's more complex than I want and I lower the divisions. So as you get used to working on things, you sort of think outside the box, literally, and think, okay, what I actually want is a modified, this, that, or the other. Okay. And your cube is one of the best ones that, with enough divisions and stuff, you can pretty much make whatever you want. Now, if something's got a hole in it, this cake has a hole in it. Um, it's a bunt cake. Or like a pipe, something like that. This is a pipe. Those are way easier to, of course, start with the primitive rather than trying to um, cut the hole in it and make it look good. All right, so I'm going to get rid of that guy. All right, let me show you something. If I make a cube, I'm going to work with our good buddy, the cube here. I'm going to get rid of that torus too. Okay. We got a cube, and we know if we round it, we've already done that a bunch of times. Hello, we've already done that. And we round it, it's going to turn into eventually sort of the ball. Okay. And we don't really want that, but I do want it to smooth off the edges a little bit. We saw what happens if you bevel the whole thing. Okay. Well, what we want is some kind of like bumpers. Okay. If I grab this edge loop, okay, if I grab this top edge loop here, and I want to bevel it, but I don't want it to go bam and do that big a bevel, right? Because then I have to go back and fix it. I want, because it's taking this edge and splitting it. But I wish I had like a bumper or something. Like, don't go all the way down there. Like, let's pretend you've got a stopper right here, a holding line right here. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and do that. We looked at how to make edge loops, right? Under mesh tool, insert edge loops. I'm going to show you guys another way to get to that even quicker. But it says click and drag on edges. So you can see when I click and drag on edge, it's like a rubber band going all the way around my object. And I'm going to put that holding line closer to the top. Let's go ahead and do both ends here just to do it. Sort of like a cap, like a lid in the bottom. Okay, and I'm going to hit Q to stop making edge loops. And I'm going to grab my edges. Okay, and now when I bevel, instead of using this whole face, it's only got this much room to bevel. Boop. Okay, and I can still make that fraction smaller, or I could segment it, right? And that looks pretty good. So if I were to click off of that, like those edges look pretty good. That's pretty nice. It's still very much a cube, but it's not going to like cut our arms off if we lean on the edges. Okay, because that would be bad for you. So that's a way to like control the smoothing. So let's go back. I'm going to step backwards a couple times here, back to where I've got those control guys. Okay, so I've got these, I always forget what they're called. I always want to call them bumpers, but holding lines, I think they're actually called. So if I've got these holding lines, okay, and here's my cube, what happens? What do you think would happen? Pause and reflect. If I were to grab this guy, if I grabbed all these edges and I smoothed this, we know that a cube is going to smooth like this, but this one's got these holding lines. So what's going to happen? Do, 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 do. Okay, this is what happens. Boop. So what happened is it was allowed to round off in this direction, but because we had the holding lines, it wasn't allowed to fall off in this direction, right? Because we're like, nope, you can't collapse this edge. So what does this look like? Well, RBB, that looks a little bit like a cylinder. Yes, it does. So if we up the divisions, okay, now we've got a pretty decent cylinder. Okay, again with no poles, because remember the cylinder is born with those poles, right? So if I know I need a cylinder and I want it to be modeled with good topology, I could start with a cube, put those two holding lines and smooth it that way. So who knew, right? So the smoothing tool can be used to actually create better modeled primitives. But let's go back to this guy. So this isn't a primitive. This is my whatever. When we smooth it, it looked kind of like a gourd or a potato or something. All right. So I don't want it to, if I go to edges, I don't want this to turn into this potato like this. All right. So I want to have some of those guards, those bumpers, those holding lines. So I'm going to show you another way to get to the insert edge loop tool in case you forget that it's under, because there's mesh, edit mesh, mesh tools, mesh display, mesh, mesh, mesh. If you forget that it's there and you give up looking, insert edge loop tool. I wish it was over here. I know the multi-cut tool is, and more advanced people are like, why don't you just use the multi-cut? Which you could, okay? But I want to show you, I just like the edge loop tool. We have looked at if I hold right mouse click, this is how I get to my edges and vertices and stuff because I'm old, right? This is old school. If I'm on an object and I hold shift and right click, whoa, I get a whole new set of menus, okay? Including multi-cut, paint edges, merge stuff, all kinds of good stuff, okay? Nice. Okay, and edge loops is in here too. Insert edge loops. Oh, okay. So that's an option. Click and drag on edges. Okay. So see, this is a loop going all the way around. I'm going to get close to this edge. And I'm going to do this for all the edges that I kind of want to control the, like it's okay. I think it's okay if it rounds these. So I'm not going to put a holding line here, but I think I do want a holding line here. I want to keep these levels, right? So I'm not making them exact or anything. And I'm going to go on either side of them. Otherwise, it'd be a little off center. Does that make sense? Because it would bevel on one side, not the other. Okay, so I add one here. Get everywhere I needed to. Holding line on top of this one. Holding line on this one. And let's do it around the top also. Oh, don't forget the bottom, or it'll turn into a big potato. Okay, so it looked like we got it. So we put a holding line on either side of any edges that we wanted to sort of rein in. Notice that these edges, right, this edge loop and this edge loop do not have holding lines. All right, let's grab all those edges. No. Excuse me. I forgot to hit Q. Stop doing it. Okay. All right, and if we smooth it, oh, look at that. Okay, so what happened here? And it looks like we forgot one edge. Okay, so what? Oh, looks like we forgot another edge. So what happened though is what happened was we reined in the edges here. Now they are rounded, right? They are beveled. They're not CG cuckoo, right? But these inner guys here were allowed to split. They were allowed to split a couple times and actually smooth them, right? So that's kind of cool. That's pretty neat. So you could choose, let's say, oh no, I didn't really want that to be real smooth. I'm going to step backwards a couple times. Okay, and I'm going to go back to my insert edge loop tool. Insert edge loops. See, I don't usually do it this way. Insert edge loops. See, that's taking me longer. So this way. Insert edge loops. Okay. So I'm going to put a bumper here and a bumper here. Like, okay, don't go crazy. Have it your way, but don't go crazy. Okay, there and there. Now I could look down here and try and see what's going on. Why did those guys split funny? Don't really see why, but that's okay. That's okay. We don't really care. So now we have a bumper on each of these, right? A holding line. So if we were to grab, I'm going to hit Q to stop making edges. Smooth. Okay. Now it respected those inside edges as well because we put those holding lines there. So this is a more mature looking model. And look, there's no like weird graying spots or anything, or, the weird spots that tell us we've got bad geometry. Okay. So that's good. That's pretty good looking. So I'm going to back up a couple times. Burp, burp. Okay. So if I'm just going to duplicate this guy. Control D, duplicate. Okay. So if I were to look at the two of these guys, which one looks like, like a better game or a better model? Okay. This one, because it's got, a more realistic edge. Now you could get in there and make these really refined or really soft. This one's really soft. These are pretty refined, but it looks better than this one that has no smoothing. Okay. So the key though that I want you to think about is in smoothing, you want to think ahead, smoothing or beveling, you want to think ahead and make sure that you have done your modeling before you get all fancy and start smoothing. Because now that I've smoothed this, if I'm like, oh man, I need to cut a hole in this or I need to extrude something, this is a way more complicated model to work on extruding than it would have been at the beginning. Do you ever see those people that work with vector drawings and instead of like a million anchors, they just are like boop, 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 and then they turn them into Bezier curves, and you're like, how did you do that? They can sort of think ahead, okay, that's going to be a curve, but I'm just going to make it an edge right now and smooth it later. So you could think, I want this to be that weird potatoy gourd looking thing. This is all I actually have to model, and then I'll just smooth it and allow Maya to do the work for me. All right, I'm going to show you another cool, cool, cool tools. All right, let's look at a sphere. Good old friend, the sphere. Okay. But RBB, that has a pole. Ew. Yes, yes, it does. Okay. Let's say we wanted to deflate this a little bit, or we wanted to sort of softly model this, not rigid or have something geometric sticking out of it. Okay, we could sort of deflate the ball. Okay, we could do something like that. Or we could take something like, let's say, the vertices, and I'm going to grab, like, I don't know, this top row here. This and I could manipulate just a few of them, right? Okay, but if I'm trying to sort of deflate this, then the next thing would be I'd have to grab this next row like this and push those down, and then the next row like this and push those down. And that takes forever, okay, to sort of make it look a little deflated or like it's sitting flat, right? It's like a little bit heavy or deflated. So that's not very, time is money, right? That's not very money. Okay. So what we can do though is I'm going to show you a new tool called Soft Select. And over here in our modeling toolkit, you'll see that there's a toggle closed guy here called Soft Select. If you toggle that open, you can see that you can toggle Soft Select on or off, and it's got this fall off like a gradient, right? From 100% to 0. And it's the range, okay? This is sort of like, I'm going to speak nerd to you, okay? This is like if you're playing, Dungeons and Dragons or something, and you've got a spell that has an area of effect. Okay, the soft select has an area of effect. It basically like a brush, right? If I were to bring up a brush tool like this, see, that's the area of effect, right? And if I were to make that bigger, now that brush has a larger, right, area of effect. The soft select is basically doing the same thing. It just doesn't necessarily show you the circle around it. Okay, so if I choose, let me grab my vertices. If I choose a vertice, you'll notice that it looks a little bit different. Now it's got this sort of rainbowy red, falling off type color. Okay. And you'll notice that my object is quite big, right? A sphere when it's born is pretty tiny. I made this guy pretty big because I know that my area of effect is pretty large. It's set at 40. If I lower this number like to 20, okay, you can see the area of effect even more. So this vertice is now 100% affected, and it drops off as it goes out. This is a little less affected, a little less affected, a little less affected, all the way till it gets to the blue is not affected at all. See the ramp from yellow to red to like purplish to black and then not affected at all. Now, what's super cool, you're like, well, area of effect, what are you talking about? If I move this now, it's not going to move just this vertice. It's going to move all of these vertices in a falling off strength. So watch this. Ooh. Oh, so cool. Okay. So now I'm pulling one vertice like this object is made out of rubber and it's a soft rubber. So if I pull on just this one nubbin, right, it's going to have a fall off until it's not strong enough to pull on any of these guys. Okay. So I could do more than one, right? I could grab a whole row of them again, right? A whole top. Okay. And now I can sort of deflate the ball. All right. And if my fall off is, well, it's the right scale, but maybe I'd like it to affect a little bit less. Instead of making, you could make this number smaller. I could also grab this little gradient. I can grab this end guy here and move it in and watch when I let go, boop, the area of effect is lowered. So now I'm still affecting this much, but the fall off happens quicker. Okay. Because if I lower that, this circle would be less, if that makes sense. All right, so now my area of effect is still all of those vertices that I chose up here, but it's affecting less of the ball. Okay, notice that right here, this doesn't change, but if I say, let the fall off be greater, it's going to affect more of the ball. Okay, and we can do this with other objects too, or other components. I could do it with a face. Okay, the face is the same way. Okay, now if you sort of forget, I'm going to turn this guy into object mode and move him over. Boop. Let's say you forget and you have a sphere. Pew, and we focus in and we're like, ooh, I want to soft select. Let's grab a vertice. And I grab the vertice and I go to move it. And you're like, man, Ruffle Boom Boom, you're such a liar. It just moves the whole thing. That's dumb. It's because our area of effect is larger than our whole entire object. Right? It's affecting the whole thing. So in that case, because this guy's really little, I'm going to lower this number to much smaller, like let's say 5. Okay. That still is pretty, that's still affecting a lot of it. What I also could do is, and I do this sometimes, like that's one. Baby, baby substance. The other thing you can do is, and I do this sometimes, is knowing that I want to self-select and I don't want to keep changing this number, I'll just make this object bigger like this for the sake of modeling and then shrink it back down to the size I want it to be. So that's kind of cool. So we've learned to refine from our sort of, choppy, blocky guys to, refining the edges a little bit, making them look a little better. We looked at how we can use the smooth tool, right, to create polygon primitives that don't have poles, right? Because later on, when we get into something fancy like Booleans, we really don't want to have to deal with too much topology. And we learned how we can take um, some primitives and make, even some other shapes. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. But that's the smooth tool, okay, and the bevel tool, and how to kind of refine our shapes once we have kind of block modeled them, to a good stopping point. Later on, when we start looking at things like UVs and putting materials and stuff on here, you're really going to care about how the topology looks. All right. So I would rather you get into the habit of doing it now rather than 2 years from now be modeling with these crappy poles and then have to learn how to fix all this stuff. All right. I hope that was helpful. I will see you guys next time in Maya 8. Do your quiz. Bye-bye. Are you doing your quiz? Are you being good?